Okay, we all know about the advantages, the whole CO2 issue in the atmosphere. This is renewable, we're not taking fossil fuels out of the ground. If you actually let wood rot in the forest, it goes anaerobic frequently. We can have methane produced. Methane's 20 times worse greenhouse gas, so it's better to burn it than let it rot in the woods. We don't have the sulfur issues we do with coal. We don't have the mercury issues we have with coal. And NOx is a special category of things. If we've got nitrogen in our biomass when we're burning it, then we produce NOx. If we burn at a temperature above 2300 Fahrenheit, then we can incorporate nitrogen from the atmosphere into to make NOx, which is a bad thing. So there's things we should know when we're doing all this kind of stuff. So there's all different categories of should we just harvest from a forest or should we plant hybrids? There's pluses and minuses, and we can kind of look through this. You have the handout and see how that all fits, but it all makes sense. Now I have my fuel calculator, so here, if you can press that button there, and then I want to run through some stuff, and that is we're going to, who's using propane or fuel oil? Anybody right now? And do you have a feel for one of those prices, what you're paying? Can you go up to this orange button, or to the touch where the natural gas is? Go in there, in the natural gas box. And what we're using? For what? For what? Propane or? Okay, so if you can drag down and get down here and get the propane. And touch propane, and then put 1.5 up in the next box. You know, no, just touching the box. There, boom. Touch it in 1.5. Just touch the box and then key in 1.5. And so now we can see what everything would cost. For instance, if she's getting your propane at $1.50, which is a little bit cheaper than it has been, then enter. That means you could go and buy soaking wet green wood fresh out of the forest, and it's worth $100 and $120 a ton to be the equivalent energy of that propane. So it's well worth switching over even to raw wet chips. If you can get some air-dried lumber or air-dried wood, that would be worth $220 to be the equivalent of that $1.50 in propane. Now propane was almost twice that for a while. Fuel oil can be even a worse case. So this comparison here really makes it easy to figure out how much can I save by switching over. Now natural gas, today it's not such a deal. If we were to go through that ordeal and put in natural gas and at its current prices, it's actually pretty close to wood today. So if you're in a natural gas area, there isn't a whole lot of reason to switch over.
Or is that 7 cents per kilowatt hour, is that right?
Yeah.
So we're pretty close to.
What you got in is $1.50 instead of $1.05.
No, that's right. $1.50 is right.
We're still pretty good.
Right. So 70 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you are using electricity for heat, you could afford to pay 70 cents instead of 12 cents. So electricity would be even worse idea to do this. So if we put in electricity up there and we put in 12 cents or something like that, then you'd see these numbers really take a jump. And this is all incorporating the efficiencies of the various types of heating. Electricity is 100% efficient. If you had a air-to-air heat exchanger or these other ground source heat pumps and that sort of stuff, then electricity is 3 times, maybe even 4 times as efficient. And so you get a much lower number for that. So in some cases, electricity, if you have the proper weather and the conditions, it can be worth switching over. So this is on our website on the front page of our lab thing. So if you look on the last page there, you can see our web page. Pull this up and you can play all day with this. So let's hop out of here. And then we'll move on. This is the power plant that is in, it's a District Energy in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a 25 megawatt power system. They have about 7 boilers so they can have different grades of fuel going into different places. They're using really lousy wood. It's just from the urban wood waste, and it's up at 40% moisture content, and it's ground up. It looks like mud when it's going in there. I mean, it's just terrible stuff. The original plan was to get all urban wood waste within 25 miles. It turns out 25 megawatts, which is 25 dry tons an hour, is too much biomass. So earlier this morning we had a discussion, well, maybe 10 megawatts is a better size, and that is a good idea. When you make electricity out of wood, you're only using 25% of the energy that's in the wood that you're converting into electricity. So you're going to have 75% of that heat energy that you're just throwing away. So what District Energy does, they're heating the entire downtown of St. Paul with that waste heat. And then in the summertime, the electricity that is manufactured during the night when they don't need it is making great big tanks of cold water that they can pump through. And in addition to that, they have absorption chillers. So that 75% wasted wood is going into making chilled water through absorption chillers. So it's the best operation there is out there, and still they couldn't make it on their own. They really have to charge 10 cents a kilowatt hour to make a go of it. That's what the market is. I mean, that's what the retail cost is. Wholesale is probably a nickel. So making power is really hard. If you have some places in the country where they're paying 20 cents, then of course something like that is a no-brainer. You want to get into it. But it's really a sin when you think of all the power plants, the coal plants that are sitting out in the country. That's the same thing with coal. It's only 20, 25% efficient. All that waste heat is going into cooling towers. So they're sinful. I have this unit, and then I got another one after this. So they'd take 5,000 of these to be the equivalent of the District Energy, and it can do the same sort of thing. This is my newer one. This is a Biomax, which is from Denver, Littleton, Colorado. It is incredibly complex, but it's all figured out. The problem is just the slightest little thing can disrupt things if you have bad fuel or anything like that. So in this case, I have to use wood pellets. If I try and use wood chips, there's just too many things that can go wrong. It's a downdraft gasifier. The chips are all in a pile. They slowly rattle down. There's a really dirty burning zone. Then farther down, it's red hot coals. That gas goes through the red hot zone. There's not enough oxygen to burn the stuff, so all that smoke and stuff is cracked and converted all the way down to carbon monoxide and hydrogen. And then that is your fuel. That's what the old town gas was 100 years ago when you had gas lanterns and people had their gas stoves, and that's why they could die, be putting their heads in the stove, because it was carbon monoxide. Same stuff people die in their cars and their garages. Today, it takes, you can stick your head in your gas stove for all day and then you just get a headache, so don't try it. So this thing can also, you can use that hydrogen and carbon monoxide, and you can put it together Fischer-Tropsch and make all kinds of liquids. The best liquid to make is diesel. Don't try and make some of these alcohols. It's not worth it. It's easier to make, but the value is so much less, and the alcohols are what biological processes make anyway. So. Forget what I was going to say about that. So now let's touch this. We're going to go right back to that same spreadsheet, except we're going to go to the next page on it. So if we touch Power Calculator, this is some of the information that is from, for instance, 25, if we look at this biggest one, 25 megawatt power system. So this is the District Energy Power. They run that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their electricity, they're selling it at 8 cents. If they buy their wood at $25 a ton, and that wood has a moisture content of about 30, that means it takes 3 pounds of wood to make a kilowatt hour of electricity. So if that thing is running like that, they are going to generate in a year 218 million kilowatt hours of electricity. They're going to use 327,000 tons of wood. The value of the electricity is going to be $17 million. And the cost of the wood was $8 million, so their gross margin, or their margin at that point, is $9 million. So half their cost goes into making that. So $9 million a year. This plant costs $150 million to put together. So it's not a fantastic, we can see why it's not that cost effective. However, with the waste heat, if that waste heat was worth $10 a million BTUs, and that last spreadsheet with the fuel one, we could see what the different ones were. I had that listed in there. We can see that now the heat is worth like $29 million, and if we were to capture half of that, that's $14 million. So our total margin now, instead of just $9 million, is $23. So the whole combined heat and power is really a big deal. The heat issue is not something you want to overlook, and that's my biggest point. If we were to, it's a summertime, we don't need any of that heat, and we were going to put all that waste heat into absorption chillers, now we have 235 million BTUs per hour of cooling capacity. And if your cooling capacity, depending on what it's replacing, as far as you now have an air conditioner, and let's say it has a SEER of 13, that's a seasonal effective energy efficiency number, that would be how many kilowatt hours saved. And if the electricity was worth 8 cents a kilowatt hour, that means that's $12 million worth of cooling that you get out of that system in the summer. So you can either get some heat out of it or cooling or some mix. In this case here, I only said we're using half of that. Here I just gave you the whole number, and then so you're going to take a fraction of that to determine how much efficiency you're going to get. So I have a little, so this is a 100 kilowatt system. It goes through the same kind of a numbers. So that same place, if you download this spreadsheet and play with it, you can do the fuel, you can move over to the power, and see if it really makes sense to make power. And frequently, especially if you're in the Northwest, it's really stupid because the numbers, it wouldn't take much to increase the cost of your wood here before this number is as big as this number. And so somebody spends all this money to make power, and then it's a wash for the electricity, and they're only going to be making money on the heat. So if you can put in a thermal unit for 1/5 the cost of a power unit, you can see where that makes sense. If we had more time, these things here, you can put in your own numbers and play this game. And in this case here, that's a 1 megawatt system, and it's $50, and this wood is soaking wet, and here it is a wash for the electricity. So the margin, the amount of money you make for your electricity is zero.
Mark, is that a green ton then on the 25 bucks?
Yeah, it's a ton. And what's defining green is takes 4 pounds of wood to make a kilowatt hour. And so if you say 2 pounds, then we know it's a dry ton. So this is basically the ton, and so it is green for that. Ooh, that's neat. Did anybody want to play this, or we'll move on? Okay, let's.
Just a quick question. Does the distributed solution have a combined heat and power component to it, or is it just an electricity generator?
The distributed?
Yeah, the smaller unit that you showed.
Oh, that particular unit, it turns out, the average amount of electricity that people use in a home, the waste heat that would be with that amount would heat the average home at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it kind of is a nice average thing. So if you had a small unit like that to heat your house, and if you got a little bit bigger unit to heat a neighborhood, that particular unit, though, is close to $500,000. It doesn't get much cheaper when it gets to a bigger unit. And that small unit has a lot of added features. It's got a battery system. So ideally, that would run from 4 to 6 in the morning, charging up all your batteries and heating your house up, and then it would kick out until the next morning. And you would have some reservoir of hot water that it would have heated. And it's heat in quite a few ways. It's kind of neat because the gases that are coming out are at 2,000 degrees, and before you can filter that and put that into an internal combustion engine, we drop it down to 200, so you're extracting heat right there. There is a radiator on the engine, and that can be displaced. You could put that radiator in your house instead of on the engine. And finally, the exhaust pipe in my unit goes through a hot water heater. And so your normal car, you can't hold on to that exhaust pipe. It's really hot. And it takes about 2 hours to fully charge a 50-gallon hot water tank in operation mode. So it's kind of neat, but it's not economical. So let's hop out of here. And now I'm going to switch topic a little bit here. And that is you guys already know this, but some people may not. And that is there are better systems, better things for better operations. If you've got dry wood, it's already beetle killed and it's dry, it's hard. And you try and chip that, you're going to have a really short life on your knives and you're going to be spending a lot of time fixing up your chipper. And so dry wood you really want to grind. If you've got really green wood and you are going to send this to some fuels for schools and you grind up green wood, you're just kind of breaking it up. And if it doesn't have some other choppers and cutters to break it into smaller pieces, you're going to have lots of ropes. Wood is very strong in its longitudinal direction. And so that's an issue. So that's mainly this, what this slide is about. You want to get the right system for what you have. And walking floor trucks and all that kind of stuff. You want to get educated before you start making any steps. And that's true with just about anything. And I did that with the talk yesterday. You want to call us up before you do that. And Craig here was part of this whole operation with these roll-off containers, and there's lots of advantages to that. When we were talking, a typical truckload of material, if it's a ton of wood, is $10 to move it 50 miles. Well, if we can have a trailer to have a second thing on there, now we've cut that down to only $5 for 50 miles. And it's the same sort of thing. The more we can carry out of the woods, the better. So they have systems with bins to throw in pieces, and then the units to hold this, and then the trailer can hook on. And I guess the point here would be, before you make your own unit, you might want to see how they're doing it over there so that you have something compatible. And they may even be, do they sell in these things? Or
There's been 4 or 5 companies around the West who have bought them, and that system's in Oregon now.
Is there some? They're keeping them so they're fit together, is what my point is there, or they should. And the whole issue, as I was mentioning, the fluffier it is, then the more expensive it is to move that stuff, because you're moving fewer tons in the truck at a time. The ideal thing is to go all the way down to the Bioil, and the pyrolysis and the woods thing is kind of what we want to go. I've been talking about the Bioil for a long time, and it's kind of funny because I keep talking to the experts, and they always say it's 2 years away, and it's been 2 years away. And I was just talking to Honeywell last week, and they have a new system. This stuff, when you do this, you're only heating wood up to a smaller temperature, and so you're not totally breaking it down to the carbon monoxide and hydrogen. You're just breaking the wood into smaller pieces about to the liquid stage. And so these molecules are 10 carbons or 20 carbons in that size range. But there's a lot of oxygen and other reactivity sites on there. So if you put this oil right into a truck and you start driving down the road, suddenly it's a one big solid mass. So it's a polymer. So you have to put in quenching agents. They use methanol and things like that. But ideally, if you can pull off that oxygen and turn it into just a pure hydrocarbon, and that's what the Honeywell's people are working on, and that's what they said, well, it's going to be 2 years away before we have that operating. So I'm going to call them up in 2 years, and they'll tell me it's 2 years away, I'm sure. But it's really neat, but it's not for prime time. And most of my work is keeping people from jumping in over their heads. A lot of this stuff is research, but we want to see it really working before we throw our money like that $50 million for solar cells that didn't go anywhere. Slash bundler is kind of a neat way to compact stuff to get it going. I forget, this is, I think, close to a $500,000 machine. Do you want to make pellets? Well, when you look at some of the numbers, it seems just, God, you almost have to. For instance, a 2.5 ton per hour pellet machine you can get for $300,000. That machine, 2.5 tons per hour, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 50 weeks a year. If your pellets are worth $150, that $300,000 pellet machine is making $3 million worth of pellets. So you've got to subtract out your electrical costs. And so that almost seems like a no-brainer that it's a tenth of a year and I've paid, the whole deal. But when you start looking at the payroll issues and the feedstock and then the packaging, that's a really big number. So the whole bulk delivery is a good idea. And the thing I forgot to mention on my Biomax unit is pellets. Let's say they're $200 a ton. When we talk about 2 pounds of wood making 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, $200 a ton comes to 20 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're paying 10. So I don't run my machine very much because it costs twice as much as the electricity that's produced. So I don't know. I'm underselling stuff just to make up for some of the people that are overselling stuff. But pellets are really neat if you have fuel oil or propane. So there's lots of systems out there that are small and modular. So your home, 170,000 is way more than a typical home would need, but this thing would only, on cold days, only need to run 1 hour every 10 or something. So there's all kinds of those units. Nice little pellet stoves. This is around 20,000, 30,000 BTUs. That could probably handle many homes much of the time. These guys I've had lots of discussions with, and it's very frustrating because they are so smart and they don't need to know anything that I'm telling them. And what they're doing is they're doing 3 things wrong at the same time. They're trying to burn wood and they're trying to grab the heat off of it right away. And so they quench the fire. The fire doesn't get hot. And by doing that, there's unburned fuel. So all this coming out here, this is unburned fuel, and that can be half the energy that's in the wood. So some of these things are 50% efficient. Some of them are 20% efficient. And then when they're calling for heat, what they do is they go into smolder mode when they don't need the heat. And then they add fuel, and then it starts pumping up the heat, and then it gets up to 50% efficient when you need it. But this acrid smoke that comes out of there is just so vile. If all they got to do is burn the wood completely and then let the thing go out. And so that's what these units do. This is a Garn Unit made in Minnesota. This is on the East Coast. There's quite a few people out there with different types of units. And all it is they have a smoldering fire like in that gasifier, but then in the next stage, all that smoke and dirty tars and stuff are added more oxygen. In fact, it's more air than in the first part of the burn. They get it up to a high temperature and burn everything, and so there is no smoke. All there is carbon dioxide and water, and there isn't a pollution issue. There aren't any, and actually, if you were to, instead of sending this into a chimney and having that chimney be the draw for that, if you have a blower, and there's a little blower on this unit here, then you don't have to have hot exhaust gas. And all the water that's going that you either made in the burning of the wood or that was in the wood when it was wet, that's going up the chimney is lost energy. So if you've got a wood that's 50% moisture content and you burn it, the very best you can do is like 77% efficiency just from that boiling water going out the top. If you've got a condensing boiler or an economizer or something that's on the end that's grabbing all that smoke and bringing it down below 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and all the water runs out and you can use that heat, 77 goes to 97. So it's really phenomenal. I'm in my basement. I'm building a home condensing boiler, and we'll see if it works. I got 2 other projects ahead of it, though. So there's lots of... You're not waving flags at me. Am I on time? But you're done. So there's all different directions you can go with all your heat or with your wood. Some things are in slightly different categories. The bioethanol, bioil, biomethanol. This is that partial breakdown. The biodiesel, that's a whole different category. That's where we're taking that the fuel is already there. It's in the soybeans or whatever, and you're just squeezing it and grabbing it out. And that's what we call biodiesel. And then the synthetic fuels, that's where we heated it way up without oxygen so we don't burn it. So we just get that hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and we build stuff. And you can build anything you want depending on what types of catalysts and temperatures and pressures. And the best thing, like I said, is to make diesel. And so the liquid fuels, there's the whole biological process. There's the pyrolysis, which is the heat to a moderately low temperature without oxygen, and then the gasification where you get up real high. And I kind of think that when we make liquid fuels 30 years from now, I don't think we're going to be seeing some of these other ones. We're going to be seeing the pyrolysis. Or if we're working with the different types of enzymes and yeast that we're developing to actually make what we want to make out of that. But there's limited things you can make when it's biological because nature hasn't developed making some things. So this is a comparison to ethanol. If we were trying to make cellulosic ethanol, the theoretical yields now, or the current is around 65. The theoretical could get a little higher. Basically, if you've been to a corn ethanol plant, they're taking corn and breaking it down to sugar, and then it's a winery and a brewery, and they're making bourbon out of the corn. If you take wood, first you got to turn it into corn, then you turn it in. So it's a one more step to the process. But this could be an add-on at our current corn facility. So if we wanted to go this ethanol route, which I'm not in great favor of, but this is how it would go. And at the lab, we just developed some new yeasts that'll do the 5 carbon sugars. You know, wood has got some 5 carbon sugars in addition to the normal 6 carbon sugars. And it turns out that the yeasts that would eat those 5 carbon sugars are killed. If you ever make wine, that wine, you can only get it up to 12% in some cases. Sometimes you get a little higher before the yeast is killed by that alcohol. So that's an issue. The 5 carbon sugar yeasts are killed at around 4 or 5%. So if you do a process, first you got to give it that yeast. You chew up all the 5 carbons, then you put in the 6 and move on. So this is what the Biooil process is. How they do it. It's basically just heating up and moving stuff around. You can pull off some of the gas. Sometimes the gas is used to keep the reaction going. How do you get this hot? Sometimes the char that comes off is sent back as the energy. There's lots of different options for that. So I already kind of talked about the whole gasification and Fischer-Tropsch. These are the guys. This is more than 100 years old as far as the technology. World War II, the cars, so a lot of them in Germany were in the trucks ran around with that. The problem at that time is those gases are fairly dirty. They really munged up the engines, and so because there wasn't a cleaning process, it was a failure. Today there's a much better cleanup process, and so it's more of a possibility. But you don't step on the exhaust or the gas pedal and you don't suddenly take off. So in Wisconsin, we had plans for a process to make cellulosic ethanol, and then they are now trying to make Jet A fuel, and we have 2 different firms in the state that are in the process. They've got all their permitting and they're ready to go, and it's going to be the whole Fischer-Tropsch gasification process. The reason we need liquid fuels primarily as jet fuels because you can't really take batteries in airplanes and stuff like that. So that's where that fits in. We need to do this, like I said earlier, if you leave wood in the forest and it's an anaerobic condition because it's low in the ground, it's underwater or any of that, and it's degrading anaerobically, then methane is the product. Methane is 20 times worse than carbon dioxide. So if we're concerned about the atmosphere, burning properly can be better than letting it rot in the woods. And that's a surprise to a lot of people. But there's a whole lot of ways to burn it improperly, like those outdoor ugly burners. I was so excited I'm going ahead of my schedule here, so I'm going to finish early. And so we'll have time for questions. So that's just a picture of a boiler. Dallas.
Mark, you were talking yesterday a little bit about a steam to some kind of engine.
Oh, I forgot to include that in a slide here. So in the event that you wanted to make 50 kilowatts of electricity, let's say, instead of buying one of these Biomax systems, which is gasifying, glad you asked this question, the system, gasifying the wood and then going into internal combustion engine and all the complexity involved in there, you can just have a boiler that makes hot water. If you have a high pressure boiler, then you can make steam, but then you need a high pressure boiler operator and all kinds of other things, and you can have the traditional steam boiler that you'll see out there for in the 1, 5, 10 megawatt power systems. If, however, you've got a little bit cooler water, or temperature coming out, and because it's hot water, instead of using and trying to make steam, you use some chemical like the freons and some of this other thing, and it goes through the same process with a turbine. and it spins that and runs a dynamo making electricity. So those are called organic Rankine cycle engines. So they're doing, steam engine is a Rankine cycle engine, but organic, so that's what the fluids are that they're using in there. And those things, they can handle input temperatures of 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of them are way down to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. And you just need some cooling to do the other half of the cycle. They're not super efficient in the really small scale, or if you're trying to tune them up and down. They're way down in, the worst case is like 12% efficiency. But if you're running that 65 kilowatt unit at peak, it's up at the same as the Biomax, which is so complex. We're at 19, 21% efficiencies. So it's a cool system. And Electrotherm in Reno is one company that